Hello everyone, what is up? It is me, AlbyMTG. For today's video, we have another about 25, I think it's 24 or 25 new spoilers, again, from Ravnica Allegiance. Before we get into the video, I do want to give a huge shout out to my newest patron, Magic with Zuby. I was on his podcast before he recently became a patron. This is the first time I'm making a video after he became a patron, so thank you, Zuby, for your support on the Patreon page. Link will be down below in the description in case anyone else is interested, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and get into the video. So, we have a couple days worth to cover because I only spoiled a couple cards over the past 2 days, so I didn't really want to cover them just like, make a quick video about 4 cards. I want to do more videos like this where I'm covering like 20 plus cards, at least 15 cards or more. So yeah, with that being said, we'll get started with Drillbit here, which is kind of like a Thoughtseize effect. This is 3 mana for a sorcery, but has Spectacle for 1 black, and then target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. I really like these kind of effects. I'm a huge fan of cards like Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize. They're probably my most casted cards in the modern format, maybe in the history of Magic for me. So I do really like discard effects. Drillbit, it seems like a pretty sweet one, especially if you can get the Spectacle cost going. Really, if you can't get the Spectacle cost going, then it's not really worth it. 3 mana for this sort of effect just isn't good. But 1 mana for this effect is quite good. So if you can get the Spectacle cost going, then Drillbit could be sweet. If you have some sort of aggressive start, like maybe start off with a turn 1 Fanatical Firebrand, like let's say you're like a black-red aggro deck, you start off with a 1-drop, get in for a quick hit with that 1-drop, and then go ahead and Thoughtseize them on turn 2, follow up with another 1-drop as well. That could be a pretty sweet start to get you started in your standard game. So I'm really interested in Drillbit. I think it's going to be a pretty sweet card. And that takes us on to the next 3 cards. Here we have a legendary creature from Gruul. This is going to be Nikia of the Old Ways, something along those lines. 5 mana for a legendary creature. You can't cast non-creature spells. That line of text makes me think that this card would work really well with Nullhide Ferox, where you already can't cast non-creature spells with the Nullhide Ferox, so running the 4-drop Nullhide Ferox into this as a 5-drop could be really strong, just curving out with those 2 cards. But then it also has this ability, whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana of any type that land produced. So it's basically doubling your mana. It's kind of like a heartbeat of spring for yourself, so that's pretty sweet. I think you could definitely do some crazy things like this. Maybe if you're playing Teamer, you could use that extra mana to put into the X cost of something like a Hydroid Krasis, which is another card from Ravnica Allegiance that we've already seen earlier. That would be a great way of doing it with Nikia of the Old Ways. But yeah, the ability, normally when you're going to use this kind of an ability to double things, you really want to focus on things with an X in their mana cost, because those are the cards that really become a lot better once you get the additional mana to add with them. So we've already seen cards like Electro Dominance, as well as like Banefire is already in Standard too, so those kind of cards could also be really strong with Nikia of the Old Ways. However, I'm also just realizing as I say that, you can quit typing now. It says you can't cast non-creature spells, and both of those are non-creature spells. Don't worry, I caught myself. You guys can stop typing now. It's been a long day. Okay, anyway, so we have cards like Hydroid Krasis. Maybe for like Modern, you have cards like Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker with X in their mana cost. You can go ahead and use them there. So yeah, man, that's a fantastic way to start the video. Reading the card explains the card, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, Nikia of the Old Way is still kind of a unique, cool card. Just make sure you actually read what it does before you decide to post a video of yourself reading what it does online and then still not understanding what it does. Alright, on to the next card. We have Silhana Wayfinder, which is 2 mana, 1 green for a 2/1. When Silhana Wayfinder enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card and put it on top of your library. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is kind of an interesting card. Most people are comparing it to Elvish Visionary. I personally like Elvish Visionary better. Silhana Wayfinder, what it has over a card like Elvish Visionary is the selection. You're looking at the top 4 cards, and you get to keep one on the top, put the rest to the bottom, or if you don't like them, you don't have to take a creature or a land. You could just say, all these cards are bad, I want to put them all to the bottom, and then just hope you draw like something decent on like your next turn. The other thing that Elvish Visionary has over Silhana Wayfinder, though, is the fact that you're drawing a card immediately. Silhana Wayfinder puts the card on top of your library, meaning you're getting a little bit of selection with it, which is nice, but you're not drawing the card immediately, which doesn't mean it technically replaces itself. It's just a little bit of an additional enters the battlefield bonus that you get from it. So this card still could be pretty good. Down here in the thesaurus, you can see the card being compared the most to it is a card like Merfolk Branchwalker. So both of those cards are legal in standard right now, so it'll be interesting to see if Silhana Wayfinder takes over Merfolk Branchwalker's plays. I personally don't think it will. I think the combination of Merfolk Branchwalker with a card like Wildgrowth Walker is really strong in standard, and so I don't think the Explorer decks would want to play Silhana Wayfinder, but maybe you'll see some other sort of deck that wants to play Silhana Wayfinder more than the Merfolk Branchwalker. Aside from that, the card will be pretty alright and limited, nothing too crazy. That'll take us on to the next card, which again is part of the cycle that has the double costs. Cards like Crackling Drake. The site can't be reached. Alright, perfect. There we go. Wonderful. Okay. Sphinx of the New Prov, I guess is how you would say this. 4 mana, 2 white, 2 blue for a Flying Vigilance 4/3. Spells that your opponents cast that target Sphinx of New Prov cost 2 more to cast. So again, it's a pretty good card. This whole cycle of cards has been really impressive, especially in the limited format. I don't think this is going to be one that you'll be seeing in something like Standard Constructed because of the fact that it only has 3 toughness, dies to cards like Lightning Strike and Lava Coil, which sure you do have to pay 2 more to do that, so it is a 4 mana Lightning Strike or a 4 mana Lava Coil, which makes it feel a little bit better that it dies to those cards, but really I don't see it being too crazy, especially because in blue-white, we have seen that maybe you could play kind of a tempo shell with Dovin Bond, but I think there's just better 4-drops that you could play instead of the Sphinx of the New Prov. So again, I think this is just going to be a fantastic card for limited. And yeah, that'll take us on to the cards for today. Those 3, as well as Drill Bit, were from the previous 2 days, so this will take us on to today's spoilers here, where we'll start off with an interesting little counter spell. Essence Capture is 2 blue mana for an instant, counter target creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. So of course, first thing that comes to mind is Essence Scatter, which is currently legal in standard. It just says counter target creature spell, but it's 1 in a blue instead of 2 blue. So here you're getting some additional upside, but it is harder to cast. So the deck that really wants to play this the most is going to be the mono blue tempo deck. That deck is really going to benefit from having Essence Capture. You can go turn 1, Mistcloaked Herald into turn 2, Essence Capture their creature, put an additional +1/+1 counter on your Mistcloaked Herald to get in for that extra point of damage. It can be really helpful, especially over the course of a game, because that thing's unblockable, so it can continuously get in for more and more points of damage. So I think the mono blue tempo deck wants this the most. In terms of a control deck, it doesn't really matter if you're getting a +1/+1 counter on something like your Nicol Bolas or your Niv Mizzet the Firemine, something like that. It just doesn't matter that those cards would have a +1/+1 counter on them. They're already big enough and evasive, so it doesn't really matter that your big creatures get even bigger. It's more about your smaller creatures getting a little bit of a buff, which is why the tempo boost is going to be, or the boost is going to be fantastic in the tempo deck. And you're not going to see control decks really wanting to play this. Control decks would just stick to something like Essence Scatter that's easier to play, especially if there's something like 3 colors like the Jeskai control deck or the Grixis control deck. After Essence Capture, that'll lead us into Theater of Horrors. Theater of Horrors is 3 mana for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top card of your library. During your turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, you may play cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. And then for 4 mana, it has an activated ability. Theater of Horrors deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So the Theater of Horrors can work out pretty well because it does enable the ability to play extra cards. It's kind of like a little bit of a card draw engine, especially for some sort of a spectacle deck like Rakdos is trying to do, where it has the spectacle enabler on it, where it can pay 4 mana to deal the 1 damage to an opponent or planeswalker to enable your spectacle, and at the same time, even if you're getting your damage the regular way, just attacking with creatures or something like that, then you're also getting to cast extra cards each turn. You're basically drawing an additional card each turn, which can be really good. We've seen this kind of effect before. Right now in Standard, something like Vance's Blasting Cannons is legal, but it's 4 mana instead of 3 mana, which makes it a little bit worse. And then we've seen cards like Chandra Torch of Defiance in the past, where you could tick her up to do a similar effect, where you would have the ability to cast something else from the top of your library. We've also seen cards like Outpost Siege, and there's been several other ones that do this sort of effect that have all been, fairly decent in Standard, and so Theater of Horrors might be the same. Theater of Horrors stands out because it's 3 mana instead of 4 mana, but again, it does have kind of a restriction on whether or not you can actually cast the card, because the opponent does have to lose life this turn. Then for the next card here, Rakdos Roustabout. This is 3 mana for a 3/2. Whenever the Rakdos Roustabout becomes blocked, deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. This card's going to be a draft card, nice and simple. Next up is Hackrobat, which is a beautiful name. I love that. And then it's 3 mana for a 2/3 with Spectacle of a black and a red. So if you can get this thing down for 2 mana instead of 3 mana, that could be pretty sweet. Hackrobat gains Death Touch until end of turn for 1 black mana, or Hackrobat gets +2/-2 until end of turn for 1 red mana. So these activated abilities are pretty nice on it. I like the Death Touch activated ability, it can be pretty sweet, especially because Rakdos generally is going to use cards that are much more reliant on damage, especially because of the Spectacle mechanic. So in Standard and things like that, you're going to see a lot of shocks and lightning strikes, much less of cards like Murder and like these hard kill effects. So I do like the ability to give this thing Death Touch as sort of an additional way of dealing with some of the bigger creatures that Rakdos might struggle with later on in the game. And then the ability to just get in for some additional points of damage, getting +2/-2 if your opponent's maybe playing a control deck, but you get this to resolve, and then you can go ahead and get in some additional points of damage maybe once they tap out. The fact that you can cast it for 2 mana makes it a very strong 2-drop if you are able to get the Spectacle cost going. I'm not sure this is going to be the strongest card for Limited. I do think there are some better 2-drops that you could potentially play, some better 3-drops as well that you could potentially play for a Rakdos aggressive style deck, but in Limited, this card again is going to be pretty sweet for your Rakdos Spectacle deck. Next up, we have again just another draft common, Soraform Hybrid. This is 2 mana for a 2/2, and then has the adapt mechanic of adapt 4 for 6 mana. So at some point later on in the game, if it's early in the game, you get a 2 mana 2/2. That's perfectly fine. Later on in the game, you could pay an additional 6 mana to turn it into a 6/6 instead, which again is pretty sweet. Not a bad common for your adapt deck. Maybe not even a bad common for your Gruul deck either. If you end up drafting it, it's a little bit less aggressive, but has a little bit of the +1/+1 counter synergy in it, and then as well is just a decent card later on in the game. Could be aggressive as a 2 mana 2/2, or could just become like the biggest creature in your deck later on in the game. Next up, we have Kaya's Wrath, which is finally a 4 mana Wrath back in Standard. We haven't really had a 4 mana Wrath in quite a while. Normally, the 4 mana Wraths in Standard are very they're very conditional. Right now we have Ritual of Soot, which gets rid of a bunch of smaller creatures. We've had cards in the past like Languish, which got rid of anything with 4 toughness or less. Kaya's Wrath is just a straight up 4 mana kill everything, and also has a little bit of a benefit to you as well. You gain life equal to the number of creatures you control that were destroyed this way. So even if you're using it to destroy some of your own creatures, then you're also gaining a little bit of life as well. Because normally if you have out several creatures on the board and you still need to wrath the board, you're probably in a pretty bad spot anyway, so getting that extra life back could be very beneficial. It is hard to cast being double white, double black, but again, that's kind of what we need for a 4 mana Wrath in Standard right now, is some sort of a drawback on it, and the drawback here is the casting cost. Next up we have Gruul Beastmaster, which is going to be a nice little uncommon here for Limited. 4 mana for a 2/2 with the Riot mechanic, which again, this creature enters the battlefield with your choice of a +1/+1 counter or haste. And then it has, whenever this creature attacks, or whenever the Gruul Beastmaster attacks, another target creature you control gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is Gruul Beastmaster's power. So this card works pretty well with what Gruul's trying to do. If you go with the +1/+1 counter, then you're going to have a 3-power creature, which can give another creature +3/+0 once it attacks. If you give it haste, then you can get in for a bunch of points out of nowhere, because you're giving this thing an additional 2 points of hasty power, plus you're giving something else +2/+0 when it attacks. But then also, Gruul is going to have some reasonable like combat tricks to go along with it, and so potentially giving this thing, before it attacks something like a giant growth style effect, maybe +3/+3, then you're looking at giving another creature +5, +5/+0, which can be really strong, especially to just steal games out of nowhere with your very aggressive Gruul style deck. Next up we have Savage Smash, which is going to be a very solid card for Gruul for Limited. This is sorcery. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It fights target creature you don't control. So again, we're already seeing these kind of pump effects from Gruul. +2/+2 could work really well with your Gruul Beastmaster, because it's essentially giving +4 power if the Gruul Beastmaster can live, and then give that additional bonus to another creature as well. Or I guess it's giving +6 power if it's giving that additional +4 to something else, and then getting the +2 from the Savage Smash itself. So that could be a pretty sweet little Limited combo there. or I guess limited synergy there. But then also having a fight effect on it as well. If you're giving a creature +2/+2, chances are it's going to be big enough to take down whatever creature it is that it's fighting. So a 3-mana little fight effect plus the +2/+2 could be really, really sweet for the Gruul deck, and I expect this to be a pretty decent common to have in the Gruul deck, maybe one of the more sought after commons for Gruul. And then that takes us on to Burn Bright. This card is basically Trumpet Blast. It's a 3-mana instant. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Card's fine if you're going wide, not overly crazy. Next up, I don't know what the name of this card is. It's a Spiral Engineer, and it's a nice simple card. Spiral Engineer is 3 mana for a 1/1, and then you can tap to add a blue and a green to your mana pool. So on turn 4, once you untap with this thing, you can tap it again to essentially make 6 mana. So you have your 4 land drops plus this for an additional two mana to possibly play a 6-drop as early as turn 4, which would be really good if you're playing something like Llanowar Elves as well, getting this guy out on turn 2 instead of turn 3. We really have the potential to ramp out some pretty decent stuff here in Standard with sort of a blue-green ramp strategy, so it is kind of nice to see this one back. Or I guess not back, but this sort of effect here for a ramp-style deck. Next up is Mesmerizing Benthid. This is going to be one of your mythics for the set. This is a 5-mana 4/5 Octopus. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 0/2 blue illusion creature tokens with whenever this creature blocks a creature, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and then the Benthid has hexproof as long as you control an illusion. So what'll be interesting here to see if there are any other illusions in the set or any other illusions previously printed in Standard that could work out pretty well with the Benthid. First thing that comes to my mind is like Jace creating the illusion, the Jace Cunning Castaway from Ixalan, pluses to, or I guess minuses? I think it's minuses. Yeah, minuses to create illusions as well, so that's something else that could synergize well with the Benthid. I feel like this card could potentially be a rare. It's going to be very annoying to play against, but 5 mana for 4 power and essentially 9 toughness is pretty good. This is a nice way to keep yourself alive, especially in a blue deck. And if you have multiple of these out, then you're getting even more illusion creature tokens, harder to lose the hexproof on the Benthids. So could be a pretty strong little card here in the Mesmerizing Benthid. Again, I'm not overly impressed with it as a mythic, but it does seem like a very strong card. Finally, we have Domri Spoiled. Domri Chaosbringer is 4 mana for a 5 loyalty planeswalker, so it isn't the 3 mana like I thought it was going to be. +1 is add a red or green. If that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains Riot. So again, we talked about Riot before. You get to either have it enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter or with haste. So that's pretty sweet. Ramps you a little bit and gives an added bonus to whatever big creature you're ramping into. That could be pretty sweet for Domri. The -3 here is look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the -3 is kind of like some card selection. I do like that it's 2 creature cards and not just 1 creature card, so that could be really beneficial as well for you know, a sort of zoo style deck that you're playing Domri in. So I do like that it's not just 1 creature and that it's 2. I can understand why it's a -3. If it was like a -1, then it would probably only be 1 creature. But again, this Domri Planeswalker enters with 5 loyalty, which is a pretty reasonable amount of loyalty as well. It's not like it's just entering with 3 loyalty and then like killing itself to find another creature or just taking up to 4. You are getting a pretty loyal, pretty hard to kill Planeswalker here. Especially because you're also going to have creatures out on the board to protect Domri as well, so you don't really need to worry too much about Domri protecting himself, which is something you normally look for in a Planeswalker, because Domri is going to be in a creature-filled deck to have the creatures help protect him himself. And then the -8, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of each end step, create a 4/4 red and green beast creature token with trample. Not the most amazing, you know, ultimate in the world. There's obviously splashier, crazier ultimates, but this one still seems like a pretty solid ultimate. Getting to make a 4/4 at the beginning of each end step seems pretty good. It's also important to note that it is at the beginning of each end step, not at just yours. So at your end step, you make a 4/4, their end step, you make a 4/4, your end step, you make a 4/4, their end step, you make a 4/4, and suddenly, over the course of just like 2 of your own turns, 2 of your opponent's turns, you get an additional 16 power worth of creatures added onto the board, which can be pretty strong here with Domri. And that'll take us on to some more cards that'll probably just kind of only see play in draft here for these ones. The Trollbred Guardian is a card that I do like for limited, though. I think this card is going to be a fairly sought-after card for limited. 5 mana, 5/5, which already passes the vanilla test, and then it has additional bonus added onto it. 3 mana for Adapt 2 to turn it into a 7/7, and then each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has Trample. So at instant speed, you can use this Adapt mechanic, turn it into a 7/7 Trampler, which is pretty sweet. Skatewing Spy being 4 mana for a 2/3, 6 mana to Adapt 2, and then each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has Flying. Again, can be pretty sweet. I can understand why the Adapt on this one is quite a bit more, because you would get a 4-power flying creature out of this if you do the Adapt on it. But normally, if you're putting +1/+1 counters on a creature, chances are that the creature is going to end up being a pretty big, beefy creature, and turning that creature into a creature that also has evasion, then with flying, can be really, really good. We're going to skip over the rare for a second because we're kind of talking about Simic and +1/+1 counters. So we'll take a look at the Combine Guildmage here first. 2 mana for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. Is a Merfolk, but I don't think will do anything in the Merfolk deck. You'd obviously just rather play something like Mistbinder, the Lord. So this is 2 mana, 1 and a green, and tap. This creature, or this turn, each creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. You do have to activate this ability before the creature were to enter the battlefield. So you want to cast this and then maybe cast, a couple creatures. You can activate this ability once and then cast 3 creatures, and all 3 of those creatures will enter with a +1/+1 counter on them. And then the 1 and a blue, in tab, move a +1/+1 counter from target creature you control onto another target creature you control. Again, you can do this at instant speed, which could be pretty good, taking a creature that you know is just going to die from being blocked by a bigger creature and taking one of its +1/+1 counters and moving it elsewhere. I do like that these are very cheap to activate abilities as well. 1 and a green and 1 and a blue are very cheap to activate. When we looked at some of the other guild mages that we saw in the previous set, some of the effects on them were like one effect that was really cheap and then one effect that was really expensive. These ones are both really cheap to do, which I do like on the Combine Guildmage. Next up we have this rare here, United Stand. 2 and a white for an instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn, and then has Addendum, which again is if you cast a spell during your main phase, you get some sort of a bonus. In this case, the bonus is you put a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures, and they gain Vigilance until end of turn. So again, you're seeing a little bit of a +1/+1 counter synergy, maybe if you're playing some sort of Bant deck or something like that. I do like these effects that are able to put +1/+1 counters on a wide variety of creatures. If you have several creatures, being able to put +1/+1 counters on all of them could be really nice, and I think United Stand is great at that. But you do only get that if it's the Addendum, so this card could be kind of interesting. You have the blowout potential of casting it as an instant, or if you just need to get through with bigger creatures and maybe defend yourself at the same time by giving them Vigilance, then you have the ability to turn this into a sorcery as well and get that, added bonus onto it. I don't see it doing anything too crazy outside of maybe a sideboard card in Standard, and in Limited it'll be a reasonable card, but nothing too crazy. So after United Stand, I believe we only have 4 more cards left. And of course, we'll refresh the page. We'll refresh the page at the end of this just to make sure. Galloping Lizrog is 5 mana for a 3/3 with Trample, but when it enters the battlefield, you may remove any number of +1/+1 counters from among creatures you control. If you do, put twice that many +1/+1 counters on Galloping Lizrog. What I really like about this card is that it has Trample, so you can essentially take your counters from these smaller creatures, put them onto something that has Trample, which I do really like for the Galloping Lizrog. If your board is clear and it's just a 5 mana 3/3 Trampler, you're gonna be a little bit upset about that. But in the situations where Galloping Lizrog is going to come down and it's just going to take like 3 +1/+1 counters off of your smaller creatures and then end up becoming a 5 mana 9/9 Trampler, that's going to be a fantastic situation for the Lizrog. And this is definitely going to be one of those cards where if you want to end up drafting Simic, this could be a fantastic uncommon for you to pick up for your limited deck. Again, being 5 mana, I don't think it'll really do too much for Standard. Next up we have Syndicate Guildmage, the Guildmage for the Orzhov Guild. Again, a 2 mana 2/2. The lower ability is tap target creature with power 4 or greater. This is kind of an interesting one. The cheaper ability is defending against these bigger creatures, which is kind of interesting. Normally you would expect that to be tapping down smaller creatures, but I'm okay with it tapping down bigger creatures too. Makes this card a little bit more relevant in the late game, which I do like. And then has 4 and a black and tap. Syndicate Guildmage deals 2 damage to target plane or to target opponent or planeswalker. Again, 5 mana for 2 damage, really not much, but it is a solid mana sink for again later on in the game. If your opponent maybe doesn't have something with power 4 or greater that you want to keep tapped down, then you can just deal 2 damage and start chipping away like that, which could be pretty solid for the Syndicate Guildmage. Next up we have Orzhov Racketeers, 5 mana for a 3/2. Whenever Orzhov Racketeers deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card, and then it also has Afterlife 2. This is just going to be your basic filler draft uncommon, I guess. It's not going to be something you pick up super high. Honestly, not really something I'm looking to play too often. Maybe in occasional Orzhov decks, I think there might end up being some 5-drops that I'd rather see see in my deck than something like an Orzhov Racketeers. Does have some solid upside if it's able to deal combat damage to a player, but being a 3/2, chances are it's not going to deal combat damage too often. But I do like that it has the ability where if they want to block it, then you're also going to get that Afterlife 2 ability that it has on it. And if they don't want to block it because they don't want to give you these flying spirits, then they're also going to have to discard a card and take the 3 damage. So it does kind of give sort of this this Punisher effect sort of thing with the Orzhov Racketeers, where either effect is going to be pretty bad for you when it attacks. So that is something to keep in mind. Maybe this card is alright, but again, I don't think it's going to be anything too crazy for limited. And then our final card for today is Ministrant of Obligation, 3 mana 2/1 with Afterlife 2. Pretty reasonable card, going to be a solid pickup for basically any deck, since it is just a single white in here, not like one white-black or anything like that. You can also play this in your Azorius decks too, and it'll be a fantastic card for your Azorius decks as well. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and refresh the page one more time, check if any new cards got spoiled. Doesn't look like they did, so with that being said, hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you guys did, be sure to leave a like on it, subscribe to the channel for more content to come here in the near future, and of course we'll be talking about more Ravnica Allegiance spoilers as they come out. So again, like I said, be sure to subscribe so you guys can get more in-depth analysis on every card as they are spoiled. It's something I really enjoyed doing at the beginning of each set, and so hopefully you guys are enjoying them as well. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I'll see you guys next time. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching yet another Ravnica Allegiance preview, spoiler, in-depth analysis video from me. Again, like I said, I love getting a chance to do these, and so hopefully you're enjoying them and learning quite a bit about this new upcoming Ravnica Allegiance set. Again, at the end of all of my videos, I love to give a huge shout out to my patrons over on the Patreon page. So again, thank you to Zuby for becoming my newest patron. Greatly appreciate the support, Zuby. Unfortunately, Zuby's not at a high enough tier to where he gets to enter the end credits of the people that I give shout outs to at the end of every single video, but the people who are on here are Jeremy, Rodrigo, Jason, Daniel, Battle of MTG, Down Under MTG, and Jayathy Swarn, so I greatly appreciate their support on the Patreon page as well. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys here next time.